we want to protect traditional Chinese medicine, traditional acupuncture, and protect it from those that don't hold our traditional values. We need to align behind a standard which is recognizable to the outside world, that confers the identity we need to protect our own medicine. And it's this nuance which I think that is so important that we get, and that's universal wherever we are, and also having a common single standard, so just to prevent the endless division, I think.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. I've been sailing since I was a teenager. It's always been a respite from whatever troubles of the moment might be dogging me. On a small, tippy boat, there's no room for your attention to wander. Moment by moment, breath by breath, the wind and water will ceaselessly bring you back to the present. Sailing small boats coordinates mind, body, balance, and attention. Like any choreography, it takes time and experience to learn the moves that seep into muscle memory. The other day, I had a new sailor join me for a club race. Much like a new student of acupuncture observing in the clinic, she was there literally to learn the ropes and see how the whole contraption works. It's fun to watch people acquire skill. It was a good day for a beginner. Enough breeze to move, but not so much that a mistake would send you for a swim. She was nervous about steering, and so that seemed like a good place to begin with building some capacity. That feeling of not sure what I'm doing and doing it anyway, it's never comfortable, but it's how we learn. The great thing about a small, responsive boat is that you get instant feedback, which means many small cycles of learning to adjust your hands to the laminar flow of the rudder and sails. There comes a moment when it clicks in, like when you feel a pulse and it actually speaks to you. We take some turns. It's tricky because you have to change sides of the boat and change which hand holds the tiller and the sail. There's a weightless moment of switcheroo that's confounding in the beginning. She asks me how I do that move, and the answer honestly is, I don't know. I've been doing it so long, I've got no idea how I do it. It's so built in, my body knows all the coordinates and moves, but I can't give you verbal directions. So, we investigate. I take the tiller and slowly go through the move, speaking out loud what I notice myself doing. Push, pause, duck, stand, hands to the hips. One hand holds the sail, the other the rudder. Then, in a pivoting turn of the hips, which brings the hands together behind the back, in that moment, you switch which one steers and which holds the sail. It's weird and helpful to bring something into consciousness that I've been skillfully executing for decades. First, an appreciation for how the body learns and stores information. And second, with increased awareness, I see where a little weight shift or synchronizing with the breath gives an extra glide to rolling the boat through a turn. Bringing attention to the fundamentals like this, it's like visiting an old friend. It reminds me again of the joy that comes from learning, how delightful it is to be able to note the subtleties otherwise so easily overlooked. My friend again takes the boat through some turns. Each one has a little more glide. There are small but notable changes. And if you know the dance steps of these turns, ease and grace will in time naturally arise. Any endeavor that requires practice also requires attentive iteration. Mindset and self-talk are important to attend to. Hearing her say, "I'm terrible at turning the boat," reminds me of students and new practitioners saying, "I'm just a baby practitioner." I don't think this kind of self-talk is helpful. I think it gets in the way of the 500 times you need to work on a particular thing before it becomes second nature. I think it's essential with each fumble or misstep to include some kind of appreciation for your effort, along with the recognition of what needs improvement. To be able to say, that's not how it works, said not as an accusation, but more as a discernment. That's not how it works, willingly explored over time, will get you to, oh, that's how it's done. It takes some time and attention, some friendliness with the feeling of being clumsy in the beginning, and instead of thinking, I'm terrible at this, saying, oh, that's not how it works. It leaves you some room for the inquiry that leads to improvement. Improvement takes time, especially if you're learning something that is difficult, like acupuncture. There are the ideas you have from what you've read in a book, or perhaps heard from a friend. Ideas that make sense and seem to fit a patient's particular presentation. Sometimes you're right. Sometimes you're getting a lesson in what doesn't work. It takes time, iteration, and a kind of attention that leaves you open to course correction based on the results of your treatment. In this conversation with Alex Jacobs, we discuss the circuitous path of learning, the inevitability of growth through challenge, the importance of listening to understand, and how TCM provides a foundation, but you have to build on those basics. We'll be getting into the benefits of going deep into a tradition as a disciple and the emergent opportunities that arise when you take the path of heretic and synthesize something new. There is no one path that leads to developing reliable clinical skills. It's not a product with a price tag. It's a process that requires your willing participation. We'll be getting into it right after this. Geological Conversations are brought to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. You have clinic challenges, our sponsors have solutions. Would you like to be able to better help your patients by understanding their blood work? Jessica Parker can take you on that journey. What's better than cupping? Cupping squared. John Stan has more on that in just a moment. Later in the show, you'll hear how my office runs smoothly with Jane, and Blue Poppy reminds us there's no such thing as a small detail. Your focus and intention are important. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Geological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. What I find really fascinating about Dr. Jessica Parker's work is that she's solving a real problem that we all see in our practices. Patients coming in with labs that say everything is normal, but they're clearly not feeling well. They're exhausted, they're struggling, and they feel unheard. Dr. Parker teaches acupuncturists exactly how to read those labs differently, not as a Western doctor would, but through the lens of Eastern medicine and functional analysis. She shows you which tests to order, how to interpret them, and most importantly, how to finally give your patients the answers they've been searching for. If you've ever wanted to add this powerful diagnostic tool to your practice, her 10-week functional medicine cohort for acupuncturists is exactly what you need. You can learn more at drjessicaparker.com and learn how to see what others are missing.
Question: why do cupping marks not appear as strongly after repeated cupping sessions over a few weeks? If you've been doing regular cupping on patients, you've probably noticed this phenomenon. The fact that it happens is one of the main reasons to offer cupping to stressed areas of the body regularly as part of a prevention program. Hi, John Stan here, inventor of the FasciaBuddy Square Cupping System. I invite you to visit fasciabuddy.com/geological and watch my short video where I discuss cupping marks with one of my colleagues, and we explore an important question: are they a bruise or a capillary bed flush? Check it out. And while you're there, sign up on the FasciaBuddy website to stay informed of the latest developments in cupping. And as a thank you, you'll receive a free, downloadable 5-minute low back, hip, and IT band protocol that you can share with your patients. Until next time, happy square cupping.
Alex Jacobs, welcome to Geological.
It's great to be here.
I'm excited to, I'm always excited to talk to people. Man, Chinese medicine is the coolest dang stuff that I've run across. It's fun to talk about. It's fun to practice. It's endlessly interesting. It's endlessly frustrating. I just can't think of a better way to go through the day.
100%. When people ask me about my career, I often say that it might be challenging and there might be highs and lows, but I can't actually remember the last time I was bored.
No, never bored. And, I've heard people talk. I love entrepreneurs. I love listening to entrepreneurs because those people are crazy. They really are. They've got an idea. It's not in the world. They think they're going to change the world with their idea. Those people are nuts. So I like listening to them. They're inspirational for me. And one of the things I hear from these folks all the time is that it's the hard stuff that's the interesting stuff. It's the hard stuff that really makes you dig in and see what you are and see what you're not. And like, that's usually where the gold is. That's where you're able to make a difference, not with the easy stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that there's something about the kind of personality that is attracted into this profession that you like living outside your comfort zone. I mean, anytime you treat a patient and you have to make it work and there's a possibility that it won't, and you have to keep taking money from a patient and keep adjusting and keep improving, that's already outside your comfort zone. And I think that something we get back from it, I think, is that growth, that internal growth that comes from challenge.
And I think we get better at it over time.
Hopefully.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, hopefully, of course. I mean, I look back on it, I'll tell you at this point, I thought I would know more at this juncture in my career than I do. But I also look at some of the places I've been and the things I've been exposed to and some of the things I have learned. And it's like, man, that was not on the itinerary when I began.
I think that sometimes we have a tendency to a bit of a bias, particularly if you're very committed in your clinic when you're in practice, of we can tend to be quite hypercritical of ourselves because we may have got a patient 80% better, but it's the 20% that we didn't that obsesses us, or the one thing that we didn't get right, or one thing they weren't happy about. And I remember the first time I started having students observing me, and it was a bit of a confidence booster because they were picking up on all these hundreds of things that I was doing in the clinic to make the treatment more effective or make the patient more comfortable, that had just been baked into my thinking. And they were reflecting that back to me, and I was realizing, oh yeah, I have progressed. I do know something, but you can really be in that zone. Somewhat, maybe it is the mark of a good practitioner that you do have that hypercritical state, but it's difficult to live with if you're not seeing your progress too.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. We get to a higher standard. We want that higher standard. I'm not saying we should do sloppy work, but sometimes there's only so much you can do. And yeah, sometimes I've occasionally had people in my clinic, students or new practitioners, and they'll observe and I'll talk to them. I'll just think out loud as I'm treating. Similar thing to you. I hear what I'm saying and I'm thinking, I didn't realize that I did this. All right? It comes into consciousness. There's so much that goes below. It's like learning to drive a car, I think. In the beginning, it's really hard. And, next thing you know, you're down the road 70 miles an hour and one hand on the wheel and looking at your phone with the other, and you're fine. It's weird.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of truth to that, and that's why I recommend to people that do consider being observed by students or even getting into teaching, because it takes the knowledge you have and the information you have, and it packages it in a different way. You develop. I've always been very much into teaching my whole life, even before I got into Chinese medicine. And it's when you have to communicate something and present it in a certain way, you learn it in a different way. And there's so many teachers that I've had that have said the same thing. Volker comes to mind, Volker Scheid. He said that same thing, that, I teach it so I can learn it.
Yes. Well, I've heard it said that if you don't quite understand something, try teaching it to someone else. Because, in the process, you'll get it. But there is that thing. And look, we're doing medicine, and medicine is complicated. None of us ever will know it all, which on a good day is like, oh, that's exciting. I've got a lifetime of, inquisitiveness to explore. And on the other hand, it's like, well, am I good enough? Do I have enough? Do I know it well enough? Am I helping my patients, in a way that's commensurate with what they're paying me? Am I looking smart or stupid in front of students? It's a very human thing to wonder if we're measuring up.
Well, I think I had a bit of a baptism of fire of quite an extended time looking stupid in front of Taiwanese patients. So I've had a bit of training in that regard. My main teacher who inspired me into the medicine to begin with is a Taiwanese doctor. His knowledge is pretty encyclopedic and real master of. I can barely comprehend the level that he's at. And I remember one time he asked me a question, and he very rarely compliments me. But he asked me a question about something, and I thought about it, and I said, I think my knowledge is too superficial to answer that. So one time he actually complimented it. He said, oh, that's a good answer. And he said to me, you know what? I think my knowledge is superficial too. And that blew my mind because I'm like, you're sitting at this exalted level of such mastery from my point of view. What are you seeing that your level is superficial? I mean, so I think maybe there's just something infinite in it, that the more you deepen into it, the more of the vastness you see.
I think that's probably true. There's that, it's so cliche, but it's still true. It's like the more you know, the less you know that you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess it keeps us humble. So this was a Taiwanese teacher that you had. You spent time in Taiwan, didn't you?
Yeah, so I had a bit of a strange friend group, actually. I was one of the last in my friends to learn Chinese, which is an odd thing to say. I had my gap year in China. I met a few friends there. And then I studied economics at university, but a good number of my friends studied Chinese and graduated. I didn't have a second language. I was retrained to be an English teacher. And I just thought, look, I want to get a second language. I have an interest in Chinese culture. I decided to go to Taiwan because they use traditional characters there. I had an interest in the deeper culture.
Mm-hmm.
Randomly picked a town, the Tainan in the south of Taiwan, and went there to study.
Tainan, huh?
Yeah.
There's so much Taiwanese spoken down there. How did you learn Mandarin?
I know. I didn't know that to begin with. So for those who might not know, Taiwan has a local language, which is the Hokkien or Minnan dialect. And in the north, in Taipei, in the capital, they'll speak more Mandarin, but in the more regional areas, they'll speak more of the dialect. The doctor that I met, when he speaks to his patients, it's all in Taiwanese. When he speaks one-to-one to me, it would be in Mandarin. It's another one of the challenges. Hard enough to learn Chinese medicine, but and you have to do it in the local dialect. So, but yes, I studied Mandarin at the main university there, Chenggong University Language Center. And then by chance, I met this doctor, and that really turned my life upside down.
Isn't it funny how these things happen?
Oh, I think that it had to. And that's a strong thing to say. But when I look back on it, I can't understand how I was guided to that point. But I think I must have been, because all the decisions I made up to that point felt very rational. Felt like I was just making rational decisions. But I know I had to meet this guy.
How did you know that? What happened?
Well, there's a very long developed relationship. It was 2002. I went to Taiwan, and I ended up staying there 3.5 years to study Chinese. And then I decided I wanted to study Chinese medicine, so I came back to the UK to study. But I've had my own ongoing health issues myself, so I've journeyed through Chinese medicine from as much as a patient as a practitioner.
Oh my God, so many of us have that journey, don't we?
100%. And my doctor in Taiwan did as well. This mentor, he'd treated himself a lot, and but it turned out that he was the only person who could actually correctly diagnose what I had. So when you think about it from that perspective, I just happened to meet the one person who was capable of the correct diagnosis, and so it's just a little bit too coincidental. I just feel when you, in retrospect, you see the things that prepared you for what you do later in life, and you say, well, I feel like that had to happen in that way.
Yeah, they'd call it yuan fun.
Yuan fun.
Yuan fun.
Definitely a lot of yuan fun going on here. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is interesting. Originally I was told that meant fate, but as time went on, I think it's a slightly different thing. It's more like opportunity meets willingness.
Interesting. Yeah. There's definitely a somewhat of a will involved, isn't it? But it's mysterious how much it is.
It is mysterious.
Yeah. Sometimes you can only unpick it in retrospect, you know?
I want to talk about the mystery stuff just a little bit. Chinese medicine, especially if you don't understand it, it's completely mysterious. Even if you understand it to some degree, it's still a little bit mysterious as far as I can tell. And, we make our livelihood sitting with people in moments of uncertainty. They come to us with health problems or, whatever it is, psychomotive issues. Who knows what they come in? They come in with something because something's going on. They don't know if they're going to get better. They don't know if we can help. Neither do we. We kind of go on this journey together with people. There's a lot of mystery involved. But it's also, I'm going to use air quotes here, medical. In the medical world, especially as we live in it here in the West, it's very flow charted and standard of care. But yes, we know that this equals that, and here's the treatment. So there's a part of us that kind of drafts along on that as well. And it's as if we are living in two worlds. One world that indeed has some mystery to it, and the other world that has rules and regulations and flow charts and all of that kind of thing. And it seems with our medicine, I know here in the States, and I suspect over where you are too, there's kind of a collision where these two cultures come together, Eastern and Western, a space of practice where, yeah, we know what we're doing. We were talking about this earlier. Do we know what we're doing? Yeah, we kind of do. But there's also room for the uncertainty of the journey and finding out, like, what is that right diagnosis for this person? And so we end up with standards, at least here in the States. We have standards, we have licenses. You have to have a license to practice in the States. And so there's a test you have to take, and it's standardized because, standards. As I understand it, where you live on the other side of the pond, you guys don't have licensure.
Well, so we have something quite interesting. And I think that I was speaking to the kind of bureaucratic institution that runs what we have recently, and we're just talking about how rare it is. So it might be a little interesting to unpack it a little bit. So we have what's called accredited voluntary regulation in the UK. Now, we're used to the government regulating a profession in law and protecting it, and we're also used to completely refusing to regulate and living in that kind of binary. In the UK, what's evolved is an organisation called the Professional Standards Authority for Health and Social Care. It is a body, it's a quasi-government body. It reports directly to Parliament. It's independent, and it is the expert on regulation. It's the body that advises the statutory regulating bodies for the doctors, for the nurses, for all the health profession. But it's also got another scheme called the Accredited Register Scheme for other health professions, where we're not regulated in law as such, but this body looks at our quality of regulation and says, yeah, that meets the same standard as the other professions. So patients can feel as safe going to one of us as they can go to a doctor, for example. So this accredited voluntary regulation is a bit different from almost every other situation across Europe and probably the US as well and other places in the world. And it has advantages and disadvantages. Acupuncture is really certainly the most prominent complementary medicine body within it. And what it affords, though, it means that our body, the British Acupuncture Council, that is the only acupuncture body in the PSA, is able to, I guess, govern itself proportionately, govern its members proportionately. And this is something that is quite unique and interesting about it. There's been a big debate about whether this is as good as being regulated in law or not. But I'm beginning to think more and more that in some ways it could be better. If we can get the benefits afforded by being regulated in law, but still have the flexibility of voluntary regulation, it may be the best of both worlds. But I think that just to pivot back briefly to what you were saying about balancing the traditional side with the the ways that we think about things in the UK in 2026 or the US in 2026. This is something that really comes up a lot and I think about a lot, because when I can feel myself, even when I'm talking about regulatory structures, I know that it's probably not really resonating with the listeners' hearts right now, right? It might be something that's interesting intellectually for some people. Some people might have a real aversion to even hearing the word regulation, because regulation feels like...
Right. Regulation, like, I'm not, like, forget it. Freedom, man.
It's just like, exactly, I don't want to be regulated. That was my first reaction to hearing the word regulation when I came into the profession. I had no interest in any of this. But then I started to see people I really respect, and people who've done so much for us, talking about regulation and saying this is really important. And so I started to try to listen to understand. I didn't understand for quite a long time. Eventually, I started to understand. Now I'm the one talking about regulation.
Okay. I just want to put a pin in this for a second because I want to come back to it. Okay. I don't want to derail you from your thought.
No problem.
But I want to come back to how you listen to understand. We're going to come back to that.
Sure.
I think it's really important.
Yeah. So my journey, I graduated in acupuncture and herbs 2010 to 12. And I then started out as a practitioner. And I felt extremely passionate about the medicine. Wasn't really interested or aware of any of the bodies, professional bodies. But I sort of by accident started helping out with the conference for the main herbal regulatory body, the Register of Chinese Herbal Medicine.
You have a lot of things happen to you by accident.
It seems like that. I feel like, in those comedy movies when they ask for a volunteer and then like everybody steps back and there's one person just standing at the front. That feels like my career, basically. It's just like I look around. Oh, it's all right. I've got to do this, do I? Right now, okay.
Guess it's me.
So, and I ended up getting more involved in it. And the reason why I ended up getting more involved, and this is a through line for me, is just seeing the just so moving, seeing people tirelessly and being unrecognized for what they do, just pour their energy and their life and their passion into pushing the profession forward in ways that people don't understand or appreciate. And then realizing that what they have fought for is now under threat in some way. And I just feel like, no, look, I'm not going to let what they fought for slip back. And it actually not only, and I've seen so much demoralization. We failed to get statutory regulation in 2008 in acupuncture. But what really hit me was in 2015, because I was more aware there, that we failed to get statutory regulation in herbs. And I saw the impact on the people who'd poured themselves into it for decades. It affected some of their health as well. And then it was really, so it was them. It was, when you're saying about listening, I remember having a conversation with the old president of the Register of Chinese Herbal Medicine and saying, but I don't want to be regulated. Why are we talking about regulation? And now I understand. It took me as it went on a journey. And what I realize now is that certainly in the UK in the way that we are, but maybe across the world, we as a profession need to be taking all of our peers on that journey to understanding. So the way I have to present the value of my organization to students. I go out to speak to the colleges and I was like, how do I communicate this? And what I put up on my PowerPoint is, you'll recognize this, Michael. Yep.
I never understood why you need another 81 chapters after saying that. Because it's like, done. The Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. Okay. Like, what else is there to say?
So I put that up and I say, look, this actually was inspired by one of my, I've had many teachers, but I studied with Andrew Nugent-Head, and he actually did a bit of a set of lectures on the Tao Te Ching. So that quote, by the way, is from the Tao Te Ching, in case there's any listeners who don't know. And he said that, look, one of the ways to understand this, because there's a million ways to understand this, right? Of course, it's infinite ways to understand it. But one of the ways to understand it is that there is an eternal Tao of the medicine, which is somewhat unchanging, right? When we talk about the Chinese medicine, right? That there's going to be something unchanged from the Neijing times until now. However, the expression of the Tao into the world, into the temporal world, will always change it. So it will look different. The Tao will look different now than it does 2,000 years ago. So there's an aspect of it that was unchanged, and there's an aspect of it that, I think, we're always going, in human beings, always going to get too hot or too cold. That's probably not going to change, right? But the way that, we gain the trust of a patient or something, completely different. And so what I say to the students is, look, to be truly Taoist, there's the famous painting of the vinegar tasters, this one. So it's kind of Taoist propaganda, but let's go with it. So you have painting of three men and a pot of vinegar. And there's one man who's refusing to taste the vinegar. There's a man who's tasting the vinegar and has got a sour expression on his face. And then there's a man who's tasting the vinegar and has got a smile on his face. And the one who's, say it's Taoist propaganda, so please, Buddhists and Confucianists, don't take this personally. So the one who's refusing to taste it is the Buddhist, right? So the Buddhist is trying to transcend the world but not engage with it, right? And the Confucianist is tasting it, but it's unhappy. So you need to change everything about the world. And the Taoist is fully embracing the entire world and transcending it in place, in a sense, and being happy, the free and easy wanderer, or, the eight immortals, that kind of idea, right? So I've had some people say to me, I don't want to deal with all that regulation of the world. I don't want to deal with all of that. That's and literally someone said to me, because I'm a Taoist, I want to focus on the medicine. And to me, what I'm trying to communicate to people is, no, this is the Tao. Of the UK in 2026, we have to engage with the language of the world. And that language necessitates us to talk about regulation and safety and trust and standards and bureaucracy, all of those things, right? That's the game. That's the game we have to play in this world. But we have to preserve the language of our tradition too. And we have to do both. We have to have a foot in each world. And that is the true Taoist. That's the happy vinegar taster. They're going to fill in the forms and they're going to understand the value of regulation. And we're going to get behind a single standard and try and push ourselves forward and do all of that stuff, but then also preserve the heart of the medicine. And that's the challenge, if you want to summarize the challenge of professional bodies all around the world, is to be able to do both of those things and preserve that and communicate that. And I'm passionate about it because they're not separate. They don't work in opposite directions. They protect each other. And we need to find a way to bridge that gap.
If you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you'll know that I'm a fan of having a small business. Running an acupuncture practice indeed requires attention to detail when it comes to managing your office. And that's why I use Jane to run my clinic. It's not just the excellent EMR or online scheduling system, both of which are a backbone to my practice. Jane also allows me to automate patient communications. They love getting text and email reminders from me, which helps to reduce no-shows. And because I choose the language for these communications, patients think I sent the message myself. They like that personal touch. I'm impressed with how flexible and scalable Jane is. From a small clinic to multiple locations and services, Jane can help you to organize the business side of the house. See how Jane can help you too by visiting jane.app/demo. Sign up for Jane and use the code CHEOLOGICAL to get a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Man, wow. I just need to let that settle for a second. There's a lot in that. I want to unpack it a little bit. I get it. I've been a nonconformist my whole life. It's just kind of the way I roll. It's brought me a lot of trouble because I create a lot of my own friction. Just so you know, I'm the guy who's like, why do I have to fill out these forms? And who are you people anyway that are telling me I got to do what I got to do? So there's that. Then I got the other side where I've studied Chinese medicine. I studied it hard when I was in Seattle. I practiced it. I spent some time in Asia. I've spent the vast majority of my life practicing this stuff. It's important to me. It's important that some schmuck down the street who might read a book or get a few hours of training in a seminar, who doesn't really know much about acupuncture, but they're using a needle in an acupuncture-like way, like, do I want them doing it? Actually, I want some regulations. Number one, I don't want people coming in and saying, I do Chinese medicine when they actually just have an idea that maybe, they do because they decide they want to. I identify as a Chinese medicine practitioner, right? I identify as an acupuncturist and I took a course over a weekend or whatever. No, I don't want them to have the title of acupuncturist. I want people to work for it. oh my gosh, look at me. Now I'm coming down on the side of regulation. I want there to be standards. I think this is just the growth of being a person. I think standards are important. They're important not as a stopping place. They're important as a starting place. Like, you got to be this tall to ride this ride at the amusement park. Something like that. And then you get into the whole thing about, well, who's standard? Okay, so what are the questions that are going to be on the test? Is it coming from the Worsley tradition? Is it coming from 8 Principles? Is it coming from Dong-style acupuncture? I mean, there's all the politics that people get into because we're people, and there's always politics if there's more than 2 people in a room. And there's that. But I really appreciate the way that you kind of bring these together. On one hand, there's what Chinese medicine is, and then there's what it is in this moment in time, given our culture, given our economics, given that the world wants to see that you got a piece of paper that says you know what you're doing. Now, maybe 500 years ago, people didn't need that, but in this world today, I think they do. I think our patients want it. They want to feel like we're looking out for them by having some kind of bar that people have to meet. So I think I'm contradicting myself in some ways, because on one hand, don't fence me in. And on the other hand, yeah, we need to agree to something that is basic so that people can trust us, really.
The funny thing about this is something unique to the West, actually. It's not the same in Asia, as you probably know, Michael. But the kind of person who's attracted into Chinese medicine is A, a bit of rebel, B, they think they know better than everyone else, including myself, right? Okay. And then
guilty as charged.
And then we somehow have to get these people to work together and agree on things. And, it's the joke about 10 acupuncturists in the room and 11 opinions, right? And it's, I think, I also had the image of Monty Python, Life of Brian, you are all individuals. Yes, we are all individuals. And then I'm not. So I think, yes, it's an interesting challenge. The funny thing is, and I don't know if you had this experience, but if you asked people from East Asia why they studied Chinese medicine, in contrast to us, where we always have a long, protracted, amazing, beautiful story, the 2 most common answers I receive are A, my grades weren't good enough for Western medicine, and B was my father told me to do it. Those are the 2 most common answers that you get in East Asia. So the kinds of characters that come into the medicine are now. Very often what I find in my East Asian friends is that they then later discover their love for it. But often it wasn't necessarily there at the beginning. Some of them are, but some of them. So we have a bit of a different character here, and we have to figure out how to reconcile these things. And I guess my message is that they're very much aligned. They're both Taoist. And I think that we also mustn't confuse what the world is demanding and the understanding of who we are and the things we have to do to create the identity that we need to push things forward in the world as it is now. And then put down one category. And in another category, we have all the things that we want to hold and sustain and develop as practitioners to be great practitioners and to sustain the medicine, pass it down to future generations in another category. Now, there is an overlap between those 2. But I think that sometimes we're talking at cross purposes. So when I'm saying we need to hold X standard, people, we have to hold this regulatory standard or abide by this law or something. Some people are thinking I'm saying I don't care enough about the tradition, or this is somehow related. This somehow gives. In the UK, we have degree level education as a minimum in acupuncture in our organization. We call that level 6. And a lot of people push back on it, say, why do we need that? I can be a great practitioner without having to read research and critically appraise things and whatever at that level of level 6. The thing is that level 6 is the minimum level to confirm medical identity. So if we want to claim that we're medics and that we're taken seriously, we need that level 6. It doesn't mean that someone who's spent their entire training in a cave with a fantastic master isn't good at Chinese medicine. Of course they may be, right? It's the question of, if we want to protect traditional Chinese medicine, traditional acupuncture, and protect it from those that don't hold our traditional values, we need to align behind a standard which is recognizable to the outside world, that confers the identity we need to protect our own medicine. And it's this nuance which I think that is so important that we get. And that's universal wherever we are. And also having a common single standards just to prevent the endless division, I think.
Man, that is so well spoken. If we want to be taken seriously as medical people in this world at this time, okay, you have to be this tall to ride this ride. Here's what you need to be taken serious that way. Now, if you're not interested in being taken serious as a medical professional, then yeah, you don't need level 6. Where do you want to play? And then you get the bigger question of, well, how does that affect the whole community, right? You're talking about how as acupuncturists, I mean, it's like herding cats. You know, we're very individualistic, and it's one of the great things and interesting things about our profession. But it also makes it really difficult for us to, align behind certain things. We're facing this here in the United States right now. Acupuncture schools are closing right and left. Many of the schools are about to lose their federal student loan funding because they don't meet a metric where you have to be able to make X amount of money to get certain kinds of loans, and most acupuncturists just don't do it. We've been out of compliance for a while now. So we're looking at this fantastic opportunity to restructure ourselves in some way. Because in some ways, the structure we have it's headed downhill and it may not be able to hold. I'm really fascinated with what you are doing there in England or UK. I never know what to say. Do I say UK? Do I say England? Do I say Great Britain? What do I call you guys anyway?
So the UK is made up of 4 countries and then all sorts of other bits and pieces and islands and crown dependencies and things. But the 4 countries of the UK are England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. And the British Acupuncture Council represents all 4, although the Northern Irish have quite rightly complained that it's called British Acupuncture Council because Great Britain doesn't actually include Northern Ireland. So so we should be called UK Acupuncture Council, but we
okay.
This is the number of problems you have when you think about even just what to call ourselves anywhere.
Yes. Well,
it's infinite, and so I like to kind of push the questions about naming aside and just say, look, we know what it is that we want. Let's just no, I do appreciate the point from the Northern Irish brothers and sisters.
Okay. Yeah, I just, as an Amerikanski, I'm never quite sure, what do these things mean?
So one of the things that, just so you can avoid some embarrassment, Michael, but if England does not apply to Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales because they're separate countries and they are part of the United Kingdom. So you can say that you are a UK citizen. For Scottish people, Northern Irish and Wales.
They're UK citizens, but they're not British. No, they're not English.
They are English. They're not English. Yes. And so I know it's complicated, but the people who most often get it wrong are the English themselves. I've seen English people say Scotland is in the northern part of England, and that's no. Do not say that. That's
okay. All right.
That's about the worst thing you could say, possibly. But there's a lot of history. We have a lot of sibling rivalry between but we love each other really.
Of course, understood, and hate each other. We love you and hate you. Yeah, I get it. It's funny, even you're saying even people over there get it wrong. I would love it when I was in China or Taiwan and people are Chinese people. They're trying to say something and understand what they're saying. And they're like, they couldn't understand each other in Chinese. Is it this duh or,
Well, Mao famously wasn't actually understood by most people, was he? He spoke a very thick dialect, I hear. So, we think of Mao as this person that was just speaking to the entire country, but he was not understood by the people around him. And I remember seeing I got really into Hong Kong movies while I was living in Taiwan, and there's a brilliant movie called there's this series of mafia movies called the Young and Dangerous series, and they get progressively better as they go on. And the last one is called Born to be King, and it's set during the Taiwanese political handover of when the first democratically elected president, Chen Shui-bian, takes over, and all the upheavals in the mafia underneath the election. But there's a brilliant scene where you have Hong Kongers, Taiwanese, and mainland Chinese all arguing in a bar, and there's a couple of Japanese sitting over in the corner saying, I don't understand why they're arguing. They're all Chinese, aren't they? And it was just a beautiful little scene. But of course, it's not that simple, of course, but yes.
It's not that simple. Anyway.
Yeah, nice little diversion. Yeah.
It's a diversion, But at the same time, we're all acupuncturists.
Yes.
But we are exactly that kind of diverse.
And you see, I spent a lot of my time thinking about this because the first driver for me was my teacher in Taiwan. So extraordinary. There's no aspect of Chinese medicine that he didn't integrate in some way. Everything from every therapy, had real mastery in all of them. And he loved dietary therapy. He'd open a restaurant that changed its menu every 15 days according to the solar terms when I first went there. It's one of my first experiences. I'm like absolutely mind blown. This guy, and every therapy, but every approach, everything, is incorporating everything from the stems and branches, the Wu Yun Liu Qi, to deep knowledge of Jingfang, to modern approaches, to Western science, to Chinese. He's a prodigy. He's a complete recluse. He's retired now, so he's also just a very odd character. I've got a million stories about him, but I've always been trying to understand what he was doing, and I could understand a little bit by spending time around him. So I learned things in the clinic. But each time I tried to engage and understand, and he would try to teach me, it just felt like, well, I haven't got the stepping stone to understand what he's telling me. So I'll go and learn this, I'll go and learn that. So I ended up learning lots and lots of different teachers over time and not feeling completely like I had to commit to this teacher's approach, but I really respected it. And I would have done. I'd be very happy to, in a respectful way. But because my motivation was slightly different, I'm trying to find these stepping stones to try and understand what my teacher was doing. And for that reason, I've had a bit of a kind of a syncretic approach to Chinese medicine, where I feel highly motivated to see how it fits together, where the common parts are, the common ground of all the styles that I've taught, and where they're actually very different. And so I realize now, having accidentally kind of been promoted upwards into where I am now, which is CEO of the British Acupuncture Council, I have a perspective on coming back to how do we bring together a community. And then we've put aside the regulation side for the moment, back to the tradition. How do we sustain the tradition? And education. You were mentioning which standards, which approaches do we incorporate? How do we improve year on year the quality of provision that we're giving, but manage all these different styles? And it's something I've thought about quite a lot.
Yes, and at the same time, at least here, make sure that people can pass the basic exam so they can get their license.
Right.
Just because it's on the exam doesn't mean it's necessarily useful in clinic. I mean, it's supposed to be, but often exams are just a bureaucratic mishmash.
Again, yes, and this is one of the things where I think that we have to acknowledge, when my teacher in Taiwan always used to say, when you graduate in Chinese medicine, that's when you start studying it. He used to say that to me. And I think that if you're happy with that, which you kind of have to be because it's the truth, you'll make it in Chinese medicine. But I think that if we start to think about graduation as the end point of study, then that's when the difficulties arise, doesn't it? Because we have to set these standards. And I think that that kind of lifelong evolution, however, it's also quite unsatisfactory and beguiling and challenging for the new graduate. How do I get better? And how do I evaluate all of these different approaches? And very often you're being asked to somewhat commit to a particular style in order to get better before you kind of will know how that style differs from another one, or
oh my God. And you cannot know at the beginning. You have to go down the path for a while and see where it takes you. There's no guarantees up front. It's like, I've heard one of the complaints, this is not just Chinese medicine education. This is education in general these days. That it's less of a preparation and way of helping to maturate a person, and it's more product. Like, I go here to learn this, and they're going to deliver me X, Y, and Z. Because because education is a product. And when I leave, I should know these things.
It's one of those things whichever way you look at it, it's, from one perspective, I completely agree with you. From another perspective, it's like, well, yes, but you should also be able to do something after you leave college. You should be able to expect to say, well,
you should, yes.
could make some patients better after I leave college. It's so in that sense there is a product to be delivered, and how do we define it? I'm very curious. I'm very interested in how people reconcile that, and there are some ideas I think are very, very important for us. Again, some things I think are very important for us to understand as a community about who we are and how we interact with others with different ideas. And I've been thinking this for a while, and when you observe the characters around you, I had a flatmate who we realized that all of our disagreements and our discussions came down to a single thing, is that I like to try and find the unity by exploring lots and lots of different things and find the unity behind it. And he liked to dive into one thing and see the totality of everything through that one thing. And we were both Tai Chi practitioners, we were both Chinese medicine practitioners, and the way we'd approach things was this. Now, we had great respect for each other, but every time we disagreed, it always came down to this. And I think that there's something in our natures, and I've jokingly called these two types the disciple and the heretic, right? Because they're the kind of slightly mocking term that each one would give each other, right? Because there's something. So the heretic, the person who likes to open their mind and embrace lots of different styles, and see that they'll look at the person who says, no, I've got the one true way, and call them a disciple, right? On the other hand, the person who sees the immense value of just deepening and deepening and deepening and deepening into their art and realizing it's infinite, and even just focusing on this one approach for your entire lifetime, it's probably not enough. They look at the person who's like a butterfly going around to all the different styles, and they think they're superficial and they're being heretical and betraying something, right? But it is joking, because I have enormous respect for both types, and I happen to see both types in myself. I guess the message that I have for our whole community is we need both types, and it's okay to be different. It's okay not to be a disciple, and it's okay not to be a heretic. It's okay to focus, for some people, to absolutely focus on their one way of working and their one lineage or whatever it is, and deepen into that, because we need you. We need those people to deepen into a practice and an approach for a lifetime so that we can preserve it. The maximum number of different traditions that we have, the better. And we need to be able to preserve it. So we need those people. But we also need the heretics. We need the people who are going around and getting the global view and trying to see how things fit together and the commonality. And I think that if we can be, at least have a kind of a ceasefire and have a mutual respect and an understanding of each other's needs as exist, I think that might resolve some of our doctrinal disputes. It might sound like a political thing to say, and you might expect it from the CEO of the British Acupuncture Council, but I haven't seen a single style where I haven't seen one practitioner in that style who isn't brilliant and employing it well and having great outcomes. So I think the preservation of our diversity of styles is really important. But at the same time, one of my real big influences is Volker Scheid, and his approach and understanding. I think some people would see him, I'm not going to call him a heretic because I'll get in trouble. But he's not. He's someone who is very interested in understanding different approaches, different lenses, and applying them in different situations. And he has a word for it. He calls it meta practice.
Yes. Well, he's also got that anthropological background, which gives him a mindset that most of us don't have.
I remember he's written a brilliant book. I've forgotten the name now, but he wrote a book, and a lot of it is about the development of TCM and how that came about, and it's really an interesting book. I remember him saying to me, "Don't worry about the first chapter because it's a bit anthropological, it might be over your head." And I'm like, hurting my ego. No, I definitely would be able to read that, and I read it. I go, "Yeah, this is pretty technical. It's pretty technical stuff."
I think that was Medicine in China, wasn't it? The one came out in the late night. Yeah.
Plurality and synthesis. Yes, that's the one. Plurality. And that's, you can see Volker's going towards that plurality and synthesis, Well, actually, so you have if you want to further subdivide it, you've got the kind of the lineage tradition where people try to preserve one thing, right? But then you have two different ways to approach diversity if you want to look at the different traditions. And this is what Volcker identified with plurality and synthesis is that he's very much arguing that, well, actually, things don't all add up between. There are genuine differences between these approaches, and that's the plurality aspect. And then the synthesis is, well, how do we find some kind of synthesis between them? And there's syncretism, which is trying to assemble a larger picture out of all of the different approaches and styles. The way that I think the way that Volcker approaches it, which is fantastic, if anyone gets a chance to explore his work, is to very much clearly define what level we're talking at any one point. And then we're not talking at cross purposes. And yeah.
So this is how the heretic and the disciple are able to have a civil conversation.
I think so. And I've seen that civil conversation with people I really respect. I've seen people who are very devoted to a particular style, but really appreciate those that don't, that have that want to understand things from a more global perspective. And I've seen the kind of great culture, for example, on the Scholars of Chinese Medicine Facebook group, where they've really tried to nurture a civil discussion there, which I think is really fantastic. And this is we should be really careful. We can have our strong opinions and we can disagree with each other, that's fine, but we should be really careful when it starts to divide us significantly, because the common ground, we need to find that common ground, and not just for us, for the future generations too.
I think especially for the future generations. And I really appreciate the way that you are speaking to that there are different streams of Chinese medicine, East Asian medicine, whatever we're calling it this week. And it's important to have those because it's part of the culture. It's part of the tradition. It's part of what comes down to us. I would say it's part of the ecosystem of what East Asian medicine is. And the more, it's plural by nature in a sense. I think Volcker would agree with that. I've heard Volcker say there is no such thing as Chinese medicine. There are many Chinese medicines. I think he said something like that. It's a small take on language, but it really changes your perspective. Oh, there's many Chinese medicines. Not to mention many Korean medicines, and at this point, English, French, and American East Asian medicines.
Yeah. Well, I having lived in Taiwan, and you've spent some time in Taiwan as well, haven't you, Michael? Is that right?
I did. 是吧?
Yeah. Well, one thing I was amused to discover is it changes Western medicine, right? So Western medicine changes wherever you are. And so when anyone gets a cold in Taiwan, you probably know, they go and see their Western doctor straight away. And they give them whatever medicine that they think is appropriate at that point. I mean, in the UK, if you don't really want to see the reaction if you're a general practitioner, if you give them, if you go and see them on your first day of your cold, it's not what you do. But of course, that's something that's inherited, I think, from Chinese medicine, right? So if people are conditioned in Chinese medicine to where you get a cold, go and see the doctor, they can treat it, And so that's carried over to their provision of Western medicine. That expectation is that Western medicine appears in a different way.
It's funny how cultures mix together and blend together that way. Yeah, Western medicine is practiced with a Taiwanese flavor in Taiwan. I guess just like Chinese medicine is practiced with a UK flavor in the UK.
Yeah, 100%. And this is why I think that, some people look at the way that our Chinese medicine is developed in the West. And some people have critiqued, said, well, this is different from what it is in the East, but it's gone through a different mind. It's come out in a different way, in a different expression. Again, it comes back to that saying from the Tao Te Ching, right? It's that this eternal Tao has expressed itself in a relative Tao now, right? And in this different zone. And if the fundamental is kept, as in the fundamental of we are orienting somehow to modeling reality, that modeling using our observations of the world through these lenses, if we're seeing something different, if something else is expressed through that, it's still valid. Because it's ultimately what is inherent about Chinese medicine is oriented to experience and observation and empiricism. So if you're preserving that, to me, you're preserving Chinese medicine.
Well, again, one of the challenges we're having here in the United States right now in terms of preserving Chinese medicine is our educational system is, some would say it's collapsing. And I'm not sure that I would disagree. A number of schools have recently gone out of business, schools that have been around a long time, and enrollments are down at schools. I know if I was a young person thinking about Chinese medicine right now, I would look at the landscape and go, that doesn't look like a very stable way forward. So we have some real challenges with that. I want to come back to, because I think we're here in the colonies right now, we're really struggling with models of how do we regulate ourselves? How do we work with regulatory agencies? What do we do with the agencies that we've created for ourselves that maybe aren't serving us as well as they could? There's questions about that. So I want to come back to what, in some ways, what we were talking about early on. Where in the UK, you guys have this system, you're like a self-regulatory body, but you're not a legal, it's like you don't grant a license, but you grant some kind of, is it credentialing? Is it, what is it that you grant?
Yeah, it's very complicated. Essentially, if you think about it, the prize of being a British Acupuncture Council member, one of the prizes, is in particularly identity, is that you can say, I'm a member of a professional standards authority accredited register, which is a kite mark to say that you are the same level of safety as a doctor or a nurse. You're not saying that we've got the same standard or we're doing the same thing, but you can get the same level of public trust effectively. And that's institutionalized. Now, there's no protection of title. Anyone can call themselves an acupuncturist, but not everyone can call themselves a PSA accredited acupuncturist. You see what I mean?
I see. Okay.
And then everything else is downstream from there. So we set accreditation standards, and we set those at a level 6 qualification for this degree level medical identity. And all sorts of other standards, regulation standards, everything. And if you adhere to those, you are eligible to gain entry to the British Acupuncture Council, and you can have that status. Now, we want to build on that status, because having that status means that we have opportunities, and in the UK, your listeners may know that we have a substantial public health provision on the National Health Service. So having that status of trust means that more doors open within the National Health Service for our members.
So people that are practitioners can participate in the national health care in receiving reimbursements? Is that?
There is more opportunity, but those programs are very difficult to set up. We have one set up in Gloucester, which is an acupuncture for anxiety clinic. They're few and far between. We'd like to build on them, but it certainly gives us that kind of opportunity. And the other thing that we need to promote is also just getting more reimbursements from private health insurance. Because we have more public provision of health in the UK, private health insurance is not like it is in the US. Most people don't have it, and the reimbursements for acupuncture aren't as much. But, I do sympathize with what you're going through in the US. I don't know if people understand that education is not nearly as expensive over here as it is in the US. I know that you have to pay an enormous amount to get educated in acupuncture and Chinese medicine in the US, and then you're paying that debt off for a long time. And now with all these colleges closing and uncertain future, it's a stressful time. I sympathize.
What would it cost in the UK to get yourself an acupuncture education that allows you to become a member of the council?
You know what? I should know this, being CEO of the British Acupuncture Council. And I'm going to throw a figure out. And if I'm completely wrong, please, accredited colleges, don't blame me. I think we're around about 20,000, something like that, for a 3-year course.
20,000 US dollars?
Pounds.
1,000 pounds.
Pounds, something like that.
Okay, so that's like what, 27,000 US?
It could be more than that. I would need to check, but it's not considerably more or less than that. So I know that in the US, someone told me recently that some of the courses you might be set back up to $250,000 by the end of the course. Is that too much? No.
God, no, I hope no. Well, okay, that would be a dramatic outlier. I'm not sure of all the pricing, but I think, I'm like you. I should have these numbers, but I don't. Actually, I shouldn't have these numbers because I don't focus on it a lot. I'm a clinician. But I think it's probably 70 to 80,000
for the total
US dollars for the tuition. And then if you're getting student loans, you have to pay the interest on that. That takes interest sometimes will be more than the actual loan amount, depending on how long you're paying it off.
Yeah.
So it's a heavy lift.
And so we're all facing these challenges, and I think that we have to somewhat ride the tiger when we're whatever era we're in. There's always an era of crisis and transition.
Of course, yeah, it's so true.
And the thing is you always get this creative destruction, and you get something that comes out of it. And I think it's the way that running these professional bodies, and it's never been an active choice of mine to pursue this. It's just happened in a certain way, and I felt very motivated to step in and support the things that have been created in the past. But what I have learned is that the way it appears from the outside is very different from the way it feels from the inside.
Mm.
And so from the outside, people can think, well, what has this body done for me? What are they doing? Why are they just... It seems like all the communications is just telling me what to do. From the inside, there is so much that goes on, which is quite hard to express. I've been trying to do my best to do it. And I created a series of talks, which I continue to do on complex and controversial subjects, just trying to turn out what the running of a professional body is like and how the complexity of some of these issues. It took me quite a while just to explain what accredited voluntary regulation is to you. Not all of our members really even understand that. And so I think that one thing I would recommend for listeners is that there's always a lot more to the story than what appears from the outside.
Mm.
And if you really care about the future of the medicine, go and talk to someone in one of those bodies and hear them unpack the nuance of the issues that you care about. Because I can tell you that if we really want to push things forward, we have to embrace the nuance. We have to understand the complexity and find an equally intricate answer to solve the problems that we have and to move forward. And the more of us that take an interest and the more of us that get that nuanced understanding, the stronger we'll be moving forward. And it always will involve trying to work together where we can and find common ground, whether it's in the tradition itself or whether it's in, as I say, the UK or the US in 2026.
In clinic, there is no such thing as a small detail. The needle you reach for, the formula you prescribe, the Sanfu Tian treatment plan you've been preparing for. Your patients place their trust in you, and you deserve to place that same trust in tools that you use. At Blue Poppy, they hold their products to the same standard that you hold your care. Herbal formulas crafted for consistency, needles that perform the way you expect them to, clinic essentials that arrive on time. As Sanfu Tian approaches, now is the time to stock your clinic with the formulas, moxin needles, and essentials you rely on most. Because when your tools are dependable, your focus stays where it belongs, on your patients. No guesswork, no compromises, just steady support behind the scenes. Blue Poppy, the choice of practitioners since 1982. I keep coming back to disciples and heretics, purists and, polluters, whatever you want to say. That these are two polarities of a unity, right? We look at yin yang. And I can remember in Chinese medicine school, certain teachers, they'd say things like, well, it all comes back to yin and yang. And I would think to myself, well, maybe that's cliche, and I'm not sure what yin and yang actually are. So, maybe it was all above my head. But I've certainly found as time has gone on, and I not just practice medicine, but just been involved in the world, we run into these polarities all the time. And it's so easy to think, well, if I just get rid of this problem over here, my problem goes away, except we're completely connected. So you can't get rid of one side of it without actually undermining yourself as well. Which brings me back to a question that I did want to come back to. I said I'd put a pin in it. And I think this is important because it's so hard for us in our modern social media, stratified, whatever, blah, 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 this particular moment. It's hard to understand other people, right? And it's so easy to sometimes hear people and just immediately dismiss them or decide, well, you said that means you're this, so I don't need to talk to you, whatever. Listening to understand. You mentioned something about developing the skill of listening to understand, which of course is super important in our clinical practice, but it seems like it's also really vital to how we navigate a moment of creative destruction, as you were just saying, as structures around us are coming apart. Alex, how do you listen to understand? What do you do? How do you make that work?
I think it's a really important question, Michael. I think that we are, and there's so much that goes into it. You know what? So many directions I could go with it, but I'm going to go with this one. I think it involves the heart, because to really understand and hear somebody, you have to, in some way, you have to love them in some way. I can't think of a better way to put it. A complete tangent, but I got very much into Dostoevsky this sounds very pretentious, doesn't it? Dostoevsky's a really good read. He's a very good writer. But one of the things that occurred to me after a while is that he loves all of his characters. You can feel it. When you read Dostoevsky, you can feel this absolute beautiful, it doesn't matter how despicable the character is, you can feel the love in the way that he's writing. Wow. And I think that's what makes him such a great psychologist. I mean, he's rated as one of the best writers of human motivation because of that. And I think that one of the things I've got most out of my career is my development is developing as a person when someone that you think your instinct is completely wrong, or they've done something that has offended you or whatever it is, or made you angry, and just to be able to take a breath and completely try and own as much of what's happening so that you can still connect on that heart level with somebody and see things transform. And I think that so listening is an active and a transformative activity. And in the end, where I found there's lots of complexities, right? We're talking about how we come together as practitioners, right? So how all these different ideas. Well, the thing is that I would say almost all of us, maybe all of us, started at a point where we just love this medicine. And there's a point where we can connect in that. And when we come back to that root, things become easy. So I think that when, the context of the listening was how I came to understand regulation, for example, and that was something which just didn't resonate with me at all. But then it was actually the enormous appreciation I have for the people around me, that I could see the sacrifices they were making. I could see their dedication and their passion, and I just wanted to help. And then it opened my mind to that. And I think that, Ting has heart in it, doesn't it? The Ting of Chinese character has...
It depends on if...
Has the ear and the heart.
If you're looking at the traditional fan tizi, yes. If you're looking at the simplified, it's just an ear
and a cross.
It's a mouth to an ear, but yeah, no. In the fan tizi, it's ear, eyes, heart.
And so I absolutely think that and just another thing that came to mind is Andrew Nugent had talked about his teacher. He would have this kind of askance view when he had a patient. He wouldn't look at them directly. In fact, his ear was facing the patient rather than the eyes. And Andrew was saying, like, I can't remember if I get this wrong, Andrew, I apologize, but he said something like this. He started to do the same thing, and he found that he was starting to kind of take in more of a composite of what he was getting from the patient, not just what he was hearing, but the entire kind of feeling that you get from a patient. And there is something about that. Just if a patient says something to me that's using an odd turn of phrase, I'll write it down in inverted commas. I won't translate it into what I think. I'll write it down and I'll just leave it there. They say, my elbow feels fizzy or something like that. It's like, well, I've never heard of a fizzy elbow before, but I'm going to write it down. And you let that kind of unpack over time. And, you find that that detective work that you do, we all know if you've been in practice for a while, you all know the experience of not understanding at all what's happening with the patient. And then after multiple appointments, different things come out, and then you get the detail, and it's like, oh yes, okay, now it's starting to come out. And I also love the experience of if you've ever seen a different practitioner, you see this in the student clinic, a different practitioner asking a patient questions, and you get completely different answers as well. So it's like this whole kind of, that goes back to this kind of interactive and transformative aspect of listening. It's a lot more active than we think.
Back to love. We don't hear people talk about that much these days.
I think that it's something that if we open ourselves to this process in life, it's not about Chinese medicine, it's not about all of life, right? There's a kind of in all of this, let's link it back to this, in all of this creative destruction, and it's not just creative destruction within our field, we can see the world melting down around us, right? And we're trying to put a little bit of the world in order, which might be just the patient in front of us, or the field of acupuncture or herbal medicine or whatever it is. And how do we do that? And what does order mean? And you were saying, what does progress mean? And all of these things, right? Well, there's something that's, if you're able to orient yourself to the heart in that way, there's something where you feel like you're on the rails. You know where the rails are. And one thing that I found in leadership roles, I found at one point being very easy to be derailed from my moral compass. Not to say that I was doing anything bad, but it's like, if you're being attacked, or if you're facing real adversity or bad behavior or whatever it is, how do you, on the one hand, maintain your moral compass, but also not lose, right? You want the correct things to prevail, And I think that that's again where this reconnection to the heart, whatever that means, and there's a lot to it. I think that there's a miraculous thing that occurs, and manifesting that into the world is the challenge that we all face, and especially in times like this.
I was going to say it's funny, but I don't think it's funny. I think it's just emblematic of how these conversations go. You earlier, as we were speaking, mentioned a line from one of your favorite books, Dao Ke Dao, Fei Chang Dao, right? The Dao De Jing, which I think all of us have some familiarity with. How could you not, if you practice the medicine that we practice? I hear you talking about heart. I hear you talking about love. Look, there's another character that has heart in it. Duh. Dao De Jing, duh. Often translated as virtue, not the virtue like I'm a better person, but the virtue of like being authentic, like in your power and authenticity in a sense. Yeah, there's a number of characters that have heart in it that might help us flesh this out, if we just go look at it. That's great.
It's the beautiful thing about this medicine and this culture is how much is encoded into the foundations and the roots of it. And one of the ways that I navigate through my own learning and my own teaching in the medicine, and I bring this in, I'm quite interested in Yang Sheng, and I've taught a lot of Yang Sheng, seasonal Yang Sheng in the past, is that what is in common, right? And when we look at how do we understand what the common ground is? And I look at it in terms of that Chinese medicine and all of the different approaches are planted into a common soil. And if we can teach the soil, that common soil, everything is planted into, then when the students then make a choice to say, you know what, I'm going to explore this plant, this expression, this manifestation, they have the soil. So they can see where they are. They can see what the origin of the ideas that they're deepening into, but then at the same time, making more of a conscious choice that this, because they can see the ground. And I think, let's not be too snooty. Our courses do a really good job, all of them, of teaching the soil. In essence, is what TCM approaches are. Smart people put TCM together. It's got a bit of a bad rap and it gets a critique, but how many of us have had the experience of deepening in an aspect of our practice and thinking that we now have special knowledge, and then picking up Macchiocci's Foundations and realized, oh, he wrote it all down in here. I just didn't pay attention originally.
It's in the Foundations. And I have found too, as I've studied, I find a certain plant and it takes me deep into something. It helps me understand something from that TCM framework that I didn't get before. Maybe it describes it better, and that's why I didn't get it before. But it was there. And yeah, TCM was, I get it, it's had a bad rap. It was also a response at a moment in time in China to a really drastic situation. And they did bring together smart people for it. They didn't just wing it. Did they put their own stamp of, Marxism and materialism and everything, blah, blah, blah. Curriculum by committee, did they put that on it? Yeah, but that's what any culture does to its educational system. It gives, the thing I love about TCM, it will give anybody the basic vocabulary to go study anything else they want that rhymes with Chinese medicine.
I see it a little bit like a pancake. If you look at, I think that when you look at Chinese medicine, it's an impossible task. You've got 2,000 years at least, 2,000 years of a continuous written record, over 2,000 years, and you have this entire history and a development. When you look at TCM, it's like you're looking through a lens, but everything is on the same level, so you don't see it as an expanded. You're seeing it as kind of a flat pancake. You don't see it as an expanded history. But it's all kind of in there. It's all in there, a lot of it. So, as I say, it's put together by smart people. When I learned Chinese language originally, in my last year of studying, I had a one-to-one teacher, and instead of just using the Chinese textbooks, I said, well, let's just look at the foundations. Let's read the foundations of Chinese medicine together, the Chinese version, the Zhongyi Jichu Lilun. So that I used that to study and improve my Chinese. Why not just directly study the thing I'm interested in?
Yeah, it's a great idea, right?
And I think that it takes on a different, sometimes it takes on a slightly different feeling when you're reading it in Chinese, because it's really deep. Those books are really, really deep. They're masterfully written. And I think that, yes, I completely understand the critiques and the construction of TCM and everything. And I really value, I've studied a lot of lineage traditions and really value them. I can see the gaps, but I think that, when I speak to Chinese people and other East Asians about their medicine, it's different. They don't have this kind of rejection of what they learned in college. Everything's just deepening into X or deepening into Y, or getting a new perspective on this. But there's no rejection of it. It's just, I think that you can deepen into it by just practicing.
I think we do deepen in by practicing. In reading, read it in English, read it in Chinese. I think just constant exposure to the stuff that we don't quite yet know.
Yes, absolutely. And willingness to face that challenge.
And willing to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not just willing to face it, but like the vinegar tasters with a smile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Volker said something to me. I'm just trying to remind myself something along the lines of, the mark of a good practitioner is one that can hold contradiction in their mind. And I think that we're often too quick to try and reconcile it. Again, it's the fizzy elbow, right? I have to write something down because I can't put those two things together in my mind right now. Let's just put it in a category. Let's put it in a box. And then we hold all this stuff and allow it to speak to us eventually. And I think that sorting out process is a key part of Chinese medicine and a key part of our own development. And eventually it allows you to progress to the next level. If you're looking at everything in purely simple terms, you might miss the opportunity to learn.
Yeah, I would say over time, I have, and this is because I practiced in clinic for a while now, a little more comfort with when I'm unsure or uncertain, or like you were saying with Volker, the ability to hold contradictions in your mind. I hadn't thought of it that way. I'm going to start thinking of it that way. For me, it's just more like, oh, I don't quite understand the whole picture yet. I'm just going to hang out with it. I'm okay with not understanding the whole picture. I'm going to trust it's going to come if I keep attending to it. I hadn't thought about if I actively hold contradictions, that might be kind of a gateway to walk through. So that's worth exploring.
Let me give you a case example of my doctor in Taiwan, right? Because I have a lot of these stories. So I would say he's kind of like a Sherlock Holmes type character. So he's noticing everything about his patients.
Wait, what kind of character?
If for Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So he's you see, he would ask me, oh, what do you think about this patient? And I would give him a diagnosis, and he'd say, I'll give you 20%. Because the diagnosis is right, but you missed X, Y, and Z about them. You missed the fact they were a teacher, or you missed the fact they had a stain on their collar, so they were rushing in today. And what does that mean? And he.
My gosh.
So I mean, he was absolutely incredible. The kind of things that he was picking up on. He just liked observing people. So one day, this family comes in, and they all see the doctor, and the 12-year-old daughter, is constipated, and he takes her pulse, and his visual diagnosis is so acute that before people sit down, he's telling them what their symptoms are, and he's always 100% on. And he takes the pulse as a check. Anyway, so he's taking the pulse of the girl, and I see a look come over him, because I rarely see it, but it's like I'm puzzled. What's going on here? So this is where the contradiction enters. And then he looks at me and he goes, take her pulse every 15 seconds. What do you feel? I'm like, every 15 seconds? What are we talking about here? I've never heard any pulse taking technique. We're supposed to look at something for every 15 seconds. Anyway, so I take her pulse, and literally like every about 15 seconds, this kind of just vibration goes through the pulse. And I'm like, I said, what's that?
What the hell is that, right?
Yeah. And he looks at me and goes, I don't know. Anyway, next day he comes in, and he'd evidently been up all night thinking about it. Like, he's just absolutely obsessive. In fact, obsessive to the point where he just gets fed up treating patients, because he can't stop thinking about patients. He has to just, when we're diagnosing patients, if we think we're getting roughly in the right territory, we're happy. Him, there's one thing that doesn't add up. He'll just obsess and obsess and obsess until he finds out what it is. And he knew how to treat her from a herbal and acupuncture point of view. That wasn't the point. So what is that?
Right, but what the hell is that thing in her pulse?
So he says, he's got a very odd sense of humor, and he says, you wouldn't want to marry that girl. And I'm like, okay, but yeah, that wasn't on the table. I'm thinking about that. And he said, okay, so this is the situation with her. Every time she feels that someone's wronged her or done something bad, she holds it in and plots revenge. And I'm like, and that's what it is. It's like holding this like strong energy in. It's just it's the behind the constipation, and it's going through the pulse. Anyway, so they
holds it in and plots revenge. Oh my God.
Plots revenge. Yeah. So anyway, I was like, okay, it's very specific. But anyway, he'd kind of figured it out somehow. Anyway, so the family comes in the next time, and he's very direct to his patients, and he just says to her, you're like this, aren't you? Every time you think something goes wrong, you hold it in, you plot revenge. And she goes, yeah, I am a bit like that. And the family all go, yeah, she's like that. Yeah.
That's incredible. That's lovely. What is that in her pulse? And then any idea how he came to that?
No, I mean, there are some things that I saw. I've got hundreds of stories like this, but there's some things I saw early on, like how did he possibly know that? And now I'm okay. I maybe have somewhat of an idea, because that Arthur C. Clarke quote: "Any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic." Right. So what we do looks like magic often, because we've learned the skill. And he would say to me, "Look, a lot of people think that I've got ESP, but I don't. I think he had very high cultivation, but mostly he said it's all technique. Most of what I do is technique and understanding." He had a very good chi cultivation too, but he was very adamant that he just really intellectually understood what he was doing. I had another patient I was there, and I was studying Chinese, and a lot of Westerners knew that I knew him and that I spoke Chinese. So I got to take a lot of people asked me to take them to see him. and I would translate. So I got to see a lot of people go through his clinic. And this one lady came along, and he took a pulse, and then he looked at me and he said, can I ask her a personal question? I'm like, oh God, where are we going now? And he said, so I said, yes, okay. And he said, can you ask her if she had an abortion 15 years ago? And I'm like, okay, now I have to ask her this. So I asked her, and she said, yeah, how did he know that? And I picked it up from the pulse somehow, and deduction. But it's all technique. And I still don't know how he did that. But it's, he's quite adamant that it's not magic. It's technique.
Okay. This is wonderful. And I'd love to explore it more in another podcast. I'd love to come back and sit down with you and talk about mastery. And you said something earlier that Volcker had said, right? A master can hold contradictions in their mind. So there's a piece. And then there's something about like intelligent cultivation. I mean, there's your chi cultivation, but there's something else that your teacher had done intellectually. But, mastery is, I find it a fascinating subject. We kind of have a fetish for the masters in our profession. I think many people would like to be a master. I'm not even sure what a master actually is. I'm kind of still shooting at like really competent journeyman myself. But in hearing you talk about this, I think about, I studied psychology years ago, and I was fascinated by a guy named Milton Erickson. I don't know if you heard of Milton Erickson. He was
No, I haven't. No.
Yeah, he's famous for a certain kind of hypnotherapy that, well, they say he invented, but I don't think he invented it. I think this is just how the cat was. He could sit down and just get who people were and tell them a story, and they would change. He was a freakishly amazing observer of human nature. And I hear your, oh, they hold it in and then plot revenge. It's like, oh, that sounds like a Milton Ericksonian kind of intervention, which again, I love hearing stories like this, right? We all like a good Kung Fu movie. And I think it's also within our cultivative grasp if we kind of know where to aim. So let's come back and talk about mastery sometime.
Love to.
That'd be fun. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this conversation today on so many levels. And I think you're right. I think Chinese medicine is an impossible task and not a bad reason for doing it.
Yeah. And definitely a wall that you want to keep yourself throwing yourself against, isn't it?
Yes, it's a wall that I want to keep throwing myself against. All right, Alex. Until next time, then.
Thanks, Michael.
Well, friends, that's it for this conversation with Alex. There's a number of things that have stayed with me from this conversation. One is that it's helpful to cultivate a willingness to live in the tension between things that don't seem like they belong together. Having a capacity to hold the seeming contradictions of the heart of the medicine and the bureaucracy that surrounds it, to be respectful of tradition and also cozy with adaptation. I like the idea of the disciple who goes deep into one stream, and also of the heretic who wanders across various ways to engage our practices, and also that certainty and contradiction, they're two sides of a coin. It's easy to imagine that real progress comes from finally resolving these tensions, but maybe practice asks something different of us. Maybe it asks us to stay curious just a little longer, to listen and to pause before deciding, to let the fizzy elbow remain a fizzy elbow until it tells us something more about itself. I appreciate Alex's willingness to engage with divergent paths of the profession, from institutional regulatory and governance to the deep aspects of practice, like learning how to use his attention from his teacher in Taiwan and developing the capacity to hold contradiction and gaining the ability to notice without immediately trying to explain. I come away with a reminder that it's important to be able to stay in relationship, even and perhaps especially when we don't quite yet fully understand it.